right. Welcome to the Passion Emotion podcast. I'm your host, Muta. And today I am joined by a very, very, very special guest, Florence Fanelli. Hi, Florence. Happy to have you here.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on your show or podcast. This is going to be dynamite. No, I really appreciate you giving me time to be on your show. So,
Yeah, no, I'm the one who feels honored, to be honest. I'm the one who feels, and I'm excited to get to know more about you and for people to get to know more about you and as well to just kind of reflect on some of the conversations that we're going to have. I think we're going to have a lot of interesting chats. So hold on to your seats, folks. Uh, so to kind of get started here, um, I want people to kind of get a sense of who you are, Florence. So would you mind telling people about who you are, what your story has been from the beginning, like just a spiel about yourself as an introduction, and then we can kind of start the conversation into the journey
yeah,
of Florence.
sure. Okay, the spiel about myself. Well, let's see. So I think that I've always known that I guess it's my origin story, right? And
Yeah.
everyone thinks of it like the super villain and a superhero. What's their origin story? But everyone has one, right? So I think
Yes.
that I grew up, with like a very much a heart for community and service, right? I knew from a very young age that I wanted to help people. So
Mm.
that grand mission statement of my life has carried on till today, decades later, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a teacher, then I wanted to be a nurse. I volunteered a lot growing up, and that was fostered by my parents, like that volunteer culture. And I volunteered in a hospital as a candy striper. I don't know if they still
Mm.
use that word, but helping the nurses, working all over the hospital in different areas. I fed patients, changed the beds, listen to their magnificent stories, like even the elderly. It was like so amazing to me. And I learned a lot about life.
Yeah.
So I think that and resilience, I think, growing up, I grew up in you know, a dysfunctional childhood, as do many people, and survived a lot of trauma. So, and I think that that's helped me, right, with the gifts of doing that, like my sensitivity,
Yeah.
where I lend sensitivity to others. So people are like, oh, you're too sensitive, or you're too much, you're too this, and you're too that. And I was like, okay, interesting. Now, those are my gifts or superpowers. My career, I went to college, studied French, business, and German. And then I obtained my MBA from American University. Go Eagles! And after that, I worked in corporate America. I grew up in the private sector, worked in
Okay.
telecom, and also IT industries. Right, I rode the .com wave. I did, I worked,
Mm.
and I was an HR practitioner, which once again goes in line with helping people. Right, loved being a
Yeah.
human resources practitioner. I loved figuring like employee investigations or doing conflict mediation between managers and staff. That was my favorite thing. I don't like my staff. I want to fire them. I hate my boss. I'm not coming to work. And I'd be like, well, interesting. I love that conflict mitigation. And I think my sensitivity and my skill set lent to that, right? My empathy. And I learned so much about people from that. And
Yeah.
then I went to mission driven work. I worked at the American Red Cross headquarters for about 5.5 years, where instead of bottom line driven, I was like, oh, cool. Never thought I'd be there. I was like, nah, only bottom line. Never gonna do this, right? One of my
Yeah.
first nevers, if you will.
Hmm.
And then in 2008, moved to Africa, Tanzania, which is my second home. And then I fell into international development. And I've worked in that field since about 2009. Uh, and I lived in Tanzania, East Africa for over 12 years. And it was one of the most beautiful, enriching, and challenging times of my life. I learned so much about
Yeah.
myself, humanity. I learned resiliency. I mean, the things that I learned from Mama Africa are just, you just can't study it, right? It's a lived experience. The resiliency of my colleagues, and all the people on the continent. It's just magic to me, right?
Yeah.
I was so humbled. I learned so much, right? Because people be like, "Oh, we learned from you." We're like, "No, like anybody from even my housekeeper James, who helped raise my son." Um, I'm like, "No, I learned," And they're like, "You gave up so many things to be in Africa." I said, no, "Did I?" Because I feel like I gained so much, right?
Yeah.
So it is my second home. And my African colleagues and friends always call me African. They're like, "Yes, you've earned the badge," or whatever, because you live there. No power, no water at different times. It is what it is. Raising my son there, his dad and I say it's one of the best decisions we made.
Mm.
Right. And he grew up there, and he also has, great love for Africa, Tanzania, and it's influenced his world. So, yeah, and then lived there, came back to the States, worked for USAID headquarters, which was another never. I always say I never wanted to work for the federal government, never wanted to work for USAID headquarters. Hey, it happened. So I loved my job. I got to travel to all our country offices. I got to support them and be with my colleagues in the field. Like, that's where I came alive. It was like the magic happened. I could be myself, and I was appreciated for being myself. Right?
Yeah.
That's the thing that, and I always say, like, I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. That really is, right?
Yeah.
But living in my authentic self, like, that's where it's at, right? It really is. So then, as everyone who's probably watching this knows, in January of 2025, dun dun dun, USAID was the first agency to become dismantled, right? So, and that brings us to current day, where it's still in the dismantling. And I'm not going to go into politics. I'm not going to go into that. But it's been a heavy season, right?
Yeah.
I was doing work, and I'm grieving that work, right? Yes, I loved it. Africa, especially going on the continent. I've also worked in Asia and Latin America, but I just loved it. And now, yeah, I was shocked, grieving. I don't know what stage I'm in the grief right now. Not deny, I don't even know. Bargaining is gone, anger sometimes, right? But I think that, yeah. So now I'm in like one of the biggest pivots of my life, Musa. Career. What am I going to do when I grow up?
I get that. Yeah. No, because the people that I've had conversations with, it's been trying to navigate how does one pivot into something that you're not, I mean, you worked in this industry for a long time, right? And now the industry is not really functional or really there anymore. And it's now like, what now? What do I do? Where do I even start? So, yeah, I've had conversations, and I've tried to at least talk to some people that could maybe help and give some new direction, but it's still not easy. It's still very, very difficult. And I think it's still definitely a good thing to give that space to say, hey, I still have no clue, still have no idea what my life is going to look like next. So yeah, I was gonna ask,
Sure.
your pivot from working in corporate into mission driven work. What fueled that pivot for you actually? Like, what made you say, I'm done with corporate and now I want to move into more mission driven work, or work at the Red Cross after working in HR and all these things for a long time?
That's a great question. Well, from 97 till about 2002, 3, yeah, 2001 or so, I loved IT and telecom, right? I was like the latest technology. This is when Java was just first coming out, voice
Mm,
over internet protocol. But then there's also the downsides of that. There are like downsizing, right? And
yeah.
then I was an HR practitioner at that time. I was laying off thousands of people, then to
Mm,
only lay myself off. right?
Wow.
And that happened several times. And then when I rode the dot-com wave, as we know, waves come down, they crash, right? Boom.
Yeah.
And it was exciting. So it was a colleague of mine who said, hey, a former colleague said, do you want me to throw your hat at the Red Cross? It's cool over here, you know? And I was like, I don't know. I said, yeah, whatever. And then that's how it happened, right? Who
Hmm.
knew? And then when I did, I was like, oh, wow, this is cool, right?
Yeah.
I like this mission driven focus. Um, it was a bureaucracy though, which I had to acclimate, right? Just
Yeah.
because, well, Clara Barton founded the American Red Cross. And I would often say, well, just because Clara did it this way doesn't mean we have to do this this way, right? And people were like, oh, wow, who is this chick? Like, who is this? So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I fell into that.
That's
And
interesting.
yeah, and then, I just, one thing. And then when I fell into international development, I think then I was like, oh, I found my calling, right?
Mm.
I just, I found it. And whether that was being working with youth entrepreneurs, oh my God, in Africa, like that lit me up. I can't even tell you, right? And just
Yeah.
giving people the education or the motivation. I was like a Shark Tank member for many of the youth like entrepreneurs at various times, like pitching their ideas and hustling. And it was just like so amazing. So I have to say, like youth empowerment, youth entrepreneurship, that's it. Because I was able to bring in my private sector, right? That
Yeah.
private sector angle and be like, okay, and then marketing and soft skills and like this is a business plan, right? Whatever
Yeah.
it was, like this is your financials, like da da da. Because I did that in my professional and I also volunteered in my personal life for that. That's how passionate, I so yeah, that's how the chain occurred.
It's not often that you hear people leave corporate and work in mission driven work. It's usually the other way around, right? Where it's like, I want to make more money. So I think this mission, because usually mission driven work doesn't pay as well as corporate, right? Because I mean, usually mission driven work is like non-governmental, it's non-profit, and it's really like, hey, you really care about this work more than you care about your lifestyle, essentially. So it's usually the
Well,
other way around. Yeah.
it is. No, it is. And I, and all of us in this field say we didn't join this field to like make $1 billion. No.
Yeah.
I mean, however, what I gained exceeds what any monetary kind of like payment could have ever been, right? The gifts I've received, they don't have to be money, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
those immaterial ones of kindness and love and the life lessons and, the grit of, and like I was talking about earlier, I, I absorbed all of that, right? What I learned, way more valuable than $1 million.
Mm. Yeah. No, I love that because again, these experiences are priceless. As you said, you can read as much as you want about other places in the world, but you living there you can't beat that. You experiencing something, you can't beat that. You can't, it's like picking up a menu and reading the ingredients of the food in front of that, the food. It's not gonna be the same as you actually eating that food.
Right.
So yeah, so I
Yeah,
think it's
exactly.
all like that. Yeah. So no, I love that. I love that. Um, Thinking more about your time in Tanzania, what was that like when you first kind of like arrived? Because was that your first time moving to Africa? Like what was that experience like in the very beginning for you?
Oh, I had actually been to Africa before in 2002. It was on my honeymoon, actually. We went to
Mm.
Nairobi,
Oh,
and
nice.
little did I know, well, maybe I did know, that the spark started then, right? We spent a month
Mm.
in Kenya going all over Mombasa and Nairobi and Lake Nguru. Oh God, Lake Nakuru. No, no, I'm mixing
Yeah.
Tanzania and Kenya, right? And
Yeah.
Mombasa, and yeah, I was in love. And you know what struck me, and I still remember this to this day, that, and it actually back then I knew about my entrepreneurial side. Well, I've actually been an entrepreneur since I've been a kid.
Yeah.
I started my first business, a babysitting business called Rainbow Babysitting, when I was about 12. And my family helped support that. My dad made copies like of and flyers, and like we all, like my family colored them, and I obtained two families for like 4 years of babysitting, right?
Nice. Yeah.
So I'm a Gen Xer, so that's why, hence the copies. There was nothing digital, right? It was literally putting it in people's mail, right? That's what it was
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to go back to Africa and everything, I'd been there. And then an opportunity came for us to move for 5 years to Tanzania. It was
Okay.
originally going to be Mongolia, but then like
Mm.
total 180, right? And then it came,
Yeah.
we're like, okay, let's do it. And so I was so inspired that I wanted to start an NGO from my first visit in Kenya. That, and the point, like I was saying, this, I'll never forget this. Children literally, our van got stuck on some muddy road in a village, right?
Yeah.
And, of course, villagers are like, what is this happening in our village? They're going to come and look and see and all this. And I just remember seeing children who lived in great poverty. Despite that, they were just happy and smiling, right?
Mm.
And so were like the elders of that village. And I just thought, this is it. And I will never forget that, right? That struck a spark in me, right? Like, we'll talk about sparkle on later, but that really, it lit this. I was like, whoa, this is it. This, and I wanted to start because I realized they had no school supplies. So it was going to be PFA, Pencils for Africa, right? And even my son knows this story now, and he goes, and his dad make fun of me about that, like Pets for Africa. But, I wanted to do that because I just saw the need, and it impacted me heavily, right?
Mm.
Like that, the empathy, the love, and then you still see the joy, right? That's the gift. That's the one of the gifts. So when I
Yeah.
first moved to Tanzania, sure, I mean, I was in Washington D.C. area for a very long time, grieving. Everything's new, different culture, just different that. So yeah, it took me about 6 months to adjust. And
Mm.
and I'd also had quit my job at the American Red Cross. And so I quit my job, settled my son in preschool, and then I was like, okay, I'm bored. I can't just go out to lunch and coffee dates with women, like, you know what I mean, with the spouses thing. I did volunteer for like an NGO that it was a women's group that gave, raised funds for like NGOs in the area. And I met a lot of great people, built my network up. So that was good. I became like the vice president of that because I was like, I need something to do. And
Yeah.
then yeah, so there was challenging, right? The language Swahili, learning Kiswahili, and but also I love the climate. Like I'm not gonna lie, tropical climate, and like right near the Indian Ocean's right there. And it was a great life, and it was actually interesting too about having house keepers and things like that. I had never in my entire life had any housekeepers, cooks, cleaners, anything.
Yeah.
And that was even an adjustment for me that like, oh, and then of course I like love that and that quality of life later on, but it was nice. And then, my son, I even had to get used to that. He was 3.5 when we went there.
Mm.
So, but then, amazing, community and the ability to give back to even have like hired, you know, like staff, like James worked for us. James, my favorite. He's down in Malawi. We still support him financially. We say as long as we can, we will.
Yeah.
He was a part of our village. He helped raise my son, right? And so I'm forever grateful. And I learned so much from him as well. And also the local everything. I'd be like, James, what's the beat on this, or what's this? Right? He ran
Yeah.
my house because I was working full time. Like he ran our house. He did all the things. And I was just like, I was like, are you a robot? Like, how do you do all this? Right. Yeah. So much love for him and, to be blessed, like 11 years, right? Of like solid, he's our family.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So that, does that answer your question, sir?
It does, yeah. Yeah, no, it does. It does. It does. Because I know leaving one place to go to another place is usually a little there's gonna be growing pains, obviously. So
Hmm.
that's kind of how it is. But shifting gears, I know that you I know that before when we got on, you really wanted to talk on the topic of grief, right? And we, even in the story, you're saying, like, there were grief moments that you're talking
Mm.
about, and how you had to adjust to those grief moments, and all that. So let's get into
All
that piece
right,
of
let's get
things.
into grief, shall we?
Yes, let's get a very hard
Everybody's
180
favorite
shift.
topic.
Yeah,
Everybody's
grief
favorite topic. And
Grief
you
is
know
so
what?
hard. Yeah, a
It
lot of people
is
don't like to talk
hard.
about it. Yeah.
But you know, the thing is, I don't think it's a depressing topic in the sense that, well, I have a lot of grief I've lived through in my life, right? But I'm
Yes.
able to see the other side, and I'm also able to help others process their grief. I keep it real, right?
Okay.
I'm a direct communicator. I keep it real. And I have folks reach out to me about it, saying, whoa, like, what do I do? Like, how do I be? Whatever it is, right? Because when you're in grief, you just feel, and you've experienced grief, right? I
Yes,
think,
for sure.
grief is universal, and every person on this planet has experienced some type of grief. Now, this doesn't have to be like someone has passed away, it's a job loss. Like many of us globally are grieving job loss, right? With this
Yeah.
dismantling of US aid. Oh, yeah, everyone's experience, it's universal, right? So to be
Yes.
human is to grieve, right? Full stop. And I think that, people are calling me the grief girl. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, but I think that despite all the grief that I've lived through, I think it's my calling to help people with that, right? I am a
Yeah.
mental health advocate, personally and professionally. And I think grief is the place where a lot of people just don't like, because it is so painful and it is so personal. And the 5 stages of grief doesn't just cover it. It's just like, okay, thanks for that chart, but I'm a human, and I'm not linear like that. And at any given time, you could be like in a different part and you don't know what's going on. You're flooded with
Exactly.
emotion, or you're blocking it, right? And you're like, no, I'm not going to do this. And I lost my parents when I was younger, my dad in my 20s, my mom in my 30s. And I've lost a lot of family members. I have lost jobs. I've been downsized. I've gone through a divorce. Like, I think, so I think, am I a grief expert for myself? Yeah. But I also feel like I'm very open about it. I like to like support others about it, right? That
Yeah.
it's hard as hell, man. Like that, it's
Yeah.
just, it's that physical pain you feel, right? And it's like that physical pain for me, it lives in my heart space. Others,
Mm.
it could live in your stomach, whatever, but you just can't even, like, when you go through that deep grief, you think it's a psychic pain, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
only way to like, and I remember that when my great grandmother died, Nana, and I was about 10.
Mm.
And I grew up in a culture where open casket is the thing.
Yeah.
Italians and Irish, like there's wakes. So there's the dead body in the casket, right? All the time. And for better or for worse, our families, we were introduced to death at a very young age, right? That's just the way it is. Now we'd sit in the back, like when we were younger, but then, the first one that really hit me was my great grandmother Nana, and then my grandmother grieving her mother. That was profound
Mm.
on me, and she almost jumped into the hole, like in the plot in the ground, my grandmother,
Wow.
like, and she's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, mama, don't, like, and I was like, whoa. And I love my grandmother dearly. And I was like, I can't have like two people, like, just like, what? My grandma's going to fall into like the hole, right? And,
Yeah.
I'm able to laugh about it. It's my experience because here's the thing. if you can't laugh, then you're going to be stuck, right? There's
Mm.
crazy stuff. Like my mom was chronically ill growing up, right? So I think I've been grieving since I actually was a baby for her when I was a baby, because she was in and out of hospital. She was born with like a birth defect with her kidneys. And so I was missing my mother. My thank God for my grandparents, so my dad could work. Like I don't know how they all did it, but they did it.
Yeah.
And so I think I suffered grief from early on in different ways. Like my mom was in and out of hospital. She almost died. Like I don't know how many times. And we used to be like, "Mom, you
Wow.
got more than lives than a cat. Like what is this, right?" Like we would just
Yeah.
laugh because my mom would laugh even, and she had great faith.
Mm.
And I'd be like, okay, what else? Okay, what God, whoever, universe or spirit, like what else? What else can she do? Like how much more pain, right?
Yeah.
And that's the grief. Like, is my mom going to almost pass away? She had a kidney removed, 7-hour operation, like sitting
Wow.
there. And no, and my dad called her a battle axe, right? She
Mm.
refused to ever, she never died until she did, right?
Yeah.
And that for me, I helped her pass in hospital, laying beside her, telling her it was okay.
Wow.
Because I know hearing is the last thing to go. And yeah, it was one of the greatest things I have done in my life, albeit one of the hardest, right? Telling my
Yeah.
mom, it's okay to go. You can be with daddy and grandma and poppy and go dancing up in heaven, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like, yeah, and my mom needed to hear that because she's going to stick around for her babies, like my brother and I, right? And her
Yeah.
grandson. And, and my son wasn't even 2 yet, right? So I was like a mom.
Mm.
And then, grief after that. And also grief, it's interesting. In the Western world, anyway, well, in the States too, we have such a different view about grief and death, right? And
Yeah.
death and things like that. And how I found mainly in Africa, it was more a celebration of life, right? In many aspects of it. Where here, I don't know, sometimes it's like, because we don't want to talk about it, like the inevitable is coming. Everyone's going to die at some point, right?
Yes.
And, it's okay to talk about it, right? And I think that I try to normalize that. Obviously, I'm not in that right now. My mom passed in 2006. So, but yeah, and grief never ends, right? That's the
It
thing.
doesn't.
What's
Mm-hmm.
isn't it? Any
Yes.
given time, you could be triggered or be like, oh my God. How many times I'm like, oh man, I want to call my mom right now, right? And even like being a mom, so many times I'd be like, Mom, like help me be a mom, right? I wanted to, right? And I think
Yeah.
that, or my dad, I just like their songs, his love of the beach. I'm a beach girl, swimming in water, like that's my dad. Like, so yeah, and it's a personal experience. I,
Yeah.
and I think that I'm here to talk about it because I feel in a respectful and loving way, right?
Mm.
That, I guess, your experience with grief. What has that been like?
Yeah. I mean, it's. I haven't experienced too much of it, fortunately enough, but I
Mm,
have experienced it in many, many ways for sure. I mean, it takes, because I'm one of those people that feels things really, really deeply. Um, I'm a huge empath. Yeah, but the thing about being an empath is that, and I think there are varying levels of what an empath entails.
mm,
But I think I might be on, because the other thing about me is I have a very active imagination. So being an empath and having a very active imagination where you think things and, it can create
mm.
a black hole in you if you experience too much disappointment, grief, or anything of the sort. So I've had to learn different ways to manage myself because I can definitely spiral. But the in terms of grief, the other thing as well is, when I have lost like family members that I've been close to, the thing that has made it easier, maybe I don't know if it's easier or not, but it's just that sometimes I've not been there. right? It's like they're because we've moved around quite a bit, so they can still be like in Zimbabwe whilst I'm in Swaziland. And for me, it's like,
Mm.
okay, I don't see us often anymore. So, but which is, but you still feel something, and you go back, and it's like, man, but um, for me to see something day to day, maybe it's like grief of like, maybe it's not people anymore, but uh, job loss or any of those things. But I always my motto that kind of keeps me going forward is that everything happens the way it's supposed to. And
Mm.
I just have to kind of trust the process of what's happening. And that's kind of what keeps me afloat. But
Yeah.
I do know that there's huge pain waiting for me somewhere down the line. As we get older, it's like, man, I'm gonna start at some point losing people that are closest to me, right? So
Sure.
I have a deep fear of, because, for example, I shared the same birthday as my mom, right? Well, so
Mm.
it's things like that where I know that if something ever happens to her, my birthday is gonna be really, really difficult for me moving forward. So it's things like that where like that kind of keeps me up at night sometimes.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah. And it could be, right? And I think that, yeah, no, I understand that completely. I've been in those dark holes and you got to climb your way out,
yes,
right? And I just think that also haven't been through it. Like, you know what? And it's hard. And I think that joy is a choice when you get
yes,
there, right? And it is. And I think that, and I'm never going to discount the hellscape or the pain or anything like that, right? Because it is what it is. And people grieve or deal in their own ways. And I'm like, yo, whatever floats your boat, how you want to grieve, as long as you're not hurting yourself or other people. Do what you got
yeah,
to do to get through the minute, the hour, the day, the week, the month, the year, right?
yeah,
And I think that grief is like, I think people often mean well and they don't know what to say, right? Like, oh, it was God's plan, or like whatever it was, right? Like, oh, thanks, I can't pay my bills though, right? Because like, and I think that people generally mean well. But do you notice about loss? So many people, generally in loss, like a lot of folks don't know what to say. It's very interesting, right? And I think that you have to make them feel better in some way.
yeah,
It's an interesting, it's human dynamics, I guess, right? That we don't like to grieve. Nobody does, right? Like,
yeah,
who's signing up? Yes, today I would like to grieve for 4 months on X. Or, right? No. And I just think it's a part of being human, right? The
yeah,
human story. And that's where people come in, right? The human connection is everything, right? For
yes.
me, I have guardian angels. I promise you that I would not be here today without them.
I feel that 100%. I feel the same way. There've been moments where I'm like, this. If I didn't have certain people looking out for me, I would not have made it out of that situation.
Right. And you know what? And some of these are people I only knew for like, I don't know, a season of my life that were just put there, and seriously, and one of them was this homeless man named Breezy. And I will never forget him. I was going through a tough
Mm.
time in graduate school in DC. And every time on my way to my therapy appointment downtown, guess who I'd see? And then we just started talking. I buy him a coffee, and I was like, and he gave me my ability to smile again, whatever I was going through. I just remember it.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, he was gone. Right? This
Wow.
is about 4 months, 4 to 5 months after. And I was like, Breezy, is he okay? And they're like, nah, I don't know where he is. And I was like, that human connection. And I guess we both needed it. Right. And
Yeah.
I'll never forget Breezy. Like, seriously, like that. Thank you. Like, because he made me smile because he'd be like, why are you so sad? Like, and then just talking. And yeah, it was really, what a cool experience, right? To be able to see it, right? And
Hmm.
um, yeah, and I think with grief, the only way through is through,
Yes. Hundred
right? You
percent.
got to sit
Yeah.
in it. Damn, like we had spoken earlier. I think I don't know if we were recording at the time that that you can like numb it however you wish to numb it, right? Like, or distract grief or pretend it's not there, or just you could hyper focus at work, or you could do all go to the gym or whatever, eat. I don't know. There's so many ways you can numb yourself. Just Netflix forever.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's something about like through it, and it will always come out in some way, right? To smack you in the face. I think that if you don't process it now, and I've learned it. I mean, I've done things that like I tried to like stuff my grief or whatever or numb it, and it backfired in things and the way I related to people and things I did, and right. And then I was like, damn. And then the key is like when you sit with the pain, it moves faster, right? Like
Yes.
when you no, but yeah, but to like try that on, that's hard.
It
It's
is.
really, that we don't want pain. Stay away.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's where the growth comes in, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh,
I've had most of my deepest thoughts in moments of deep grief or moments of deep heartbreak. And I'll always remember thinking to myself when I was in one of those pockets that, you know what? I don't need happiness. I just need peace. And I just work towards inner peace more than I was like, I don't need to be happy. I just need to feel
yeah.
peace. I just want to feel like I can just be fine. Like I don't want to have fluctuating emotions. I just want to have just that peace aspect of it. So that I remember that's just what something I just think about, like just working towards that peace every
Yeah,
day.
that's
And
great.
just, yeah. So
Because
that's how I kind
peace,
of,
I agree with you on that. Peace is priceless. It's powerful. It's everything, right? And
yeah.
then for me, it's like joy is my big thing, like choosing the joy, right?
Mm,
And there's a thing, even like when with grief of anything, you can get stuck in that, like you're not allowed to be joyful or happy,
yes.
right?
Yes.
And you are. Hey, here's a newsflash. Everybody's watching. Like, here's the thing, you can have joy and grieve at the same time, right?
Yeah.
It is possible. It is okay. And no one's going to. And that's the other thing I learned is that, like, don't ever let anybody tell you how you should grieve,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's personal. I've had so much advice over the years, and I'm like, okay, thanks, man, thanks, man, thanks, man. But it's your work. And
Mm,
I think with the loss of a person or a loved one or a pet or anything, you know what? It hits real hard when everybody leaves after the funeral,
oh
right?
yeah.
And then you're
That's when it's
left
tough.
with yourself and the hell and the pain and the this and the that. Or, and the other thing is that the world moves on.
Mm-hmm.
That's, for me, that was hard. And that still is hard for me to digest that. Like, my parents died, like, yo, no respect. Like, what do you mean life goes on, work goes on, all these things go on? And they do, for better or for worse, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just, it helps in some ways, but then you also feel mad about it, right? I had to go to work after my parents died. After my mom died, I'm still a mom. I couldn't just be like, yo, like, right? And he wasn't even two yet.
Mm,
So I think that that's the other thing is that, yeah, man, it's just when you sit there and you're like, what? Does no one care about I lost my job or like like even that, or, and it's not that people don't care. It's just that people, we're flawed humans.
yeah. Yeah.
And we don't always get it right. Uh, and that's okay. I think, yeah, it's,
So yeah,
yeah,
I have a question. So when you were growing up and you said that you saw all these grief things, especially with your mom and being in and out of hospital, how did you internalize that growing up? Like, how did you rationalize some of those things, and how did that kind of impact how you thought about life and how you thought
yeah.
about things like that? Just in general, like what was that like for you, and how do you think that might have shaped you into who you are today?
Oh, 100%. I mean, as a child in your formative years, you don't know what you don't know. Right.
Yes.
Like, and I think between my mom and my dad was also an alcoholic for a very long time. So, the space for my brother and I, sometimes there wasn't space for our emotions, or, you know what I mean? Because it wasn't about
Mm,
us. Although I have to say, my parents they did the best they could. I forgave
yeah.
them all of these things. Like life happens, right? And their generations didn't know how to deal with things. No one told them these life skills. No one said, right, whatever it was. And, you know, my family emigrating from Ireland and Italy and all that, like intergenerational trauma, it's real, right?
Yeah.
So I think it formulated who I am, like very sensitive, but you know, but it's also, there's this great book, I think, I read it years ago. Is it The Drama of the Gifted Child? The gifts you learn or have, like, of living through trauma. One of them is my humor, right? Like, or my sensitivity, like my superpowers, empathy, right? That, and, you know, I always think of 5-year-old Florence as my like inner child, you know, all that kind of work, like looking at it. And yeah, and she's at the beach and she's having fun, right? And so, and it's almost like and then also being, and what I've learned is like being who I needed as a child, like myself, showing up for myself for who I needed, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, I had like great love. I always felt loved, right? Because we had a big family. It's just life that happened, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, it did it totally affected who I am, right? But now I'm like, it's my superpowers, right? Like, you
Yeah.
know, you reframe it. Yeah, and it took me a while. You know, I'm in my 50s, Gen X, and I tell you what, it's like when you get off your own story, right? Or the racket, or this, or I'm not going to be a victim, or right, like all of these things, because everyone has trauma in their life, right? Capital
Yeah.
T, baby T, whatever. Because that's another thing. To be human is to have experienced trauma, right? Like you can't, right? You can't, and especially even social media, the exposure of news and wars and conflicts, right? It's expanded.
Yeah.
So I think that, yes, 100%.
Yeah, because even childbirth is trauma, right? Babies cry as soon as they leave the mother's womb. Like they're leaving this warm place
Oh my
and now
God,
they're in this
yeah.
cold place. So yeah, as you just said, the human experience is riddled with trauma in different ways.
It is, right? Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So what I'll ask, you know, as we're kind of getting to the tail end here. So as we said in the beginning that, you know, a lot of people who are working in the development industry and people grieving. It's not even just that. There are a lot of people in the world who just job loss is
Yeah.
rampant right now. You know, people, it's really hard to find a job. People are getting laid off a lot. Just the economy is bad. Everything's so expensive. And, you know, to your colleagues and to people out there who are grieving this time period, what do you say to those people to kind of, like, what words of encouragement do you have or strategies you might have to say, okay, I know this is where you're at. This could be helpful.
I think, okay, that's a really great question that has so many answers. I could go on a year talking about this, but I think the first thing is to acknowledge the pain, right? It's
Yeah.
okay. And I also, yeah, and the only way through is through. It sucks. You can hate it. You can do this and then you process, right? And then how do you process? What momentum? What will make you move forward, right? And just, I always think of like, do the next best thing that will help you move forward. That could be meaning take a walk, dancing in your house to music, which I do all the time. The power of dancing and music. Music is life for me. Afro
Yes.
beats, especially. Burna Boy. I
It's good.
think that no, music is life. Or what do you love? Like, you know, just focus on that creativity, whatever that looks like in your space, to get it out. Are you a painter? Are you a writer? Or, you know, whatever that, are you a gardener? Like anything, are you a podcaster, right? That's artistic. That's your creativity. That's your thing. Like, what do you love to do? Because you know what? I'm at this pivot and I'm grieving too, but I'm also choosing to reinvent myself, right?
Yes.
And I'm calling this my Renaissance sabbatical. Like I'm just, you know, and also I'm rising. I'm a phoenix from the flames, right?
Yes.
And I've been there many times before. And if you could see that image, I actually created one on AI with AI. It was amazing. It's a woman. I said, you know, you give it the descriptors. It's a woman in this red dress coming out like a phoenix of the fire.
Hmm.
And that's what I think is that when you take back, you know, and also the thing is, I learned really, which is great in March, I am not my job. My
Yes.
identity is not international development, right?
Yes.
And to break from that, woo, that was eye opening. That, and did I even adopt values that maybe weren't even my own? What? Like, I mean, so I think I've had a rebirth. So it's take the time to get to know you again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what do you want to do when you grow up? I'll tell you what. I've been wanting to start my own business and venture since I've been in what, a long time, 20s, and then life happens. I have a kid. Da, 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 da. So if I'm still happily working at USAID right now, right? If not now, when?
Exactly.
So, and you always got to keep your sparkle. You got to sparkle on, Mutsa.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And I think, and then, you know what, this is like, this is naturally like me. I'm a joyful person, right? Like if you think about, oh, believe me, I have down times. And do you know that movie about the emotions with Disney? And there's
Yes.
joy is like the little,
Inside Out.
yes. I figured like that's joy is my like symbol. Like I'm always like, hey, what's up? What's up? Now I have
Yeah.
hard as hell times, right? But I
Yeah.
think this is my natural core. And I love to help people and connect with people. And I think that each of us has a sparkle inside, right? We each
Yes.
have light and we each have the ability to be a light worker. What the heck
Mm.
does that mean, dude? Right? Is that like hippie stuff? No, it means that our true inner human wants to connect with other humans, right? We need people. We're social creatures.
Yes.
And it goes in that line with kindness. Kindness is free, man. And guess what? It comes back to you 20-fold, right? To be kind. And I think that's the thing about grief, that I can help others, right? And so I'm starting a new venture about grief. And
Mm.
it's a passion of mine. Sounds odd to say it, but it is, the helping people through the grief and what that looks like by telling my story. Because, you know, we often think like, well, my story doesn't matter. Well, it does. Actually, everybody's does, right?
Yeah. It does.
So yeah, and I have this quote I kind of just made up. Can I say it?
Yes. Yeah. Feel free to
Okay,
share it.
so grief cracked me open. Woo, like I tell you what, in tiny pieces, right? I said, but the light that poured out, you know what? That was my sparkle, right?
Beautiful.
So that's why I'm always going to say sparkle on. And people are like, huh? But call me Sparkle Grief Girl. I don't know. So
Yes.
yeah. So is that the advice? Is that good? Does that wrap it up?
I think it is great, and I love that quote you saying about how grief cuts you open, grief open. It cracked you open, right? Because it's a very visual quote. Because
Mm.
and it cracks. Grief is, again, we are saying this off before we recorded, that grief is one of those things in life that really does stop you and ground you. Like, right now it's the grief that makes, as you were saying, it made you stop and say, what if, I've really been wanting to do this thing, and now I feel like I should. Now I'm in it and I should, do that. And I think that's what grief does a lot in the human experience, that it actually can pinpoint the important things to you. Some things become way less important and some things become way more important.
Oh, amen
And
to
so,
that. Isn't
yes, I
it?
think, yeah, there's
It's
nothing, I don't
relieving.
think there are many things that do that in the human
No, and you're
experience.
spot on. That's so insightful, Mutsa. That it's exactly that. What's important and what is not. And it gets easy, doesn't it? You
It does.
delineate the two and you're like, okay, no, 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 right? Where your precious energy, where can you focus that, right?
Exactly.
We only have so many hours and we don't know when our time on the planet is going to be finished, right? So in the meantime, bet on yourself because I'm betting on me right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And me betting on me is going to help other people, right? That's my
Yeah.
equation, if you will. Right? And so I can sparkle on and pass the sparkle, maybe? That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. So I also want to give light to what you were talking about, this new venture that you want to help people with their grief. So if someone's listening to this podcast and they're like, hey, I'm in the thick of it right now and I
Mm.
want to reach out to you or to speak to what are you offering, or what's that, what can you do for them in a sense?
Oh, great. Thank you. Well, it's still under construction, but watch this
Yes.
space. I should say I'll be on LinkedIn and everything. But I think what I'm doing, I'm going to target grief in the workplace at this point,
Okay.
right? I personally lived this. That how do you go back to work after something just really bad happened, right? Like, and I think that's what I'm doing in the mental health area. It seems like people talk about mental health, right? Or hey,
Yeah.
call this EAP, Employee Assistance Program. Okay, so and that could be in the form of toolkits or like I could do consulting, right? I'm still like hashing it out, but like I
Okay.
can speak of it. Being a grief educator, right?
Yes.
I'm not a mental health expert and never claim to be. This is my lived experience as an educator. Yeah, complete lived experience. And you should also have, I'm a big proponent of therapy, right? Like that's
Yeah.
it. And, I've had a number of folks reach out to me, right? And so I think, like, okay, and I joke, and maybe it's not a joke that I've said for the past 10 years, I could teach a master class in grief, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's going to be a master class too, right? Like online
Yeah.
forum. I'm also going to be authoring a book. So yeah, stay tuned.
That's awesome. No, you know what? I'm very excited to hear this. So, you know what, listener, you're hearing this first, and there's something we can look forward to. And I'm excited to see which direction you end up, like what you end up doing and bringing it to life. I think it's gonna be really, really impactful and useful to a lot of people. So,
Oh,
this I
thank
guess this is
you.
kind of like a good preview to that,
I
and people can,
appreciate that. It's the
yeah,
pre-marketing of it. I love that.
yes,
Teaser,
yes.
maybe a teaser, if you will.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think this gives more understanding to what the conversations will be for people who do end up reaching out to you. So I think, yeah, I'm happy that this podcast can serve as that,
Yeah, I
as that
really
starting point.
I'm so grateful that you've mentioned that. And you know what? Maybe I'll come back in a year's time on your podcast and give an update, or 6 months, or whatever that looks like, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you'd always be welcome here. 100%. 100. I think
Aw.
there's a lot more that we could definitely dive into, especially on this topic. But I think, yeah, I think this is a good kind of introduction into that.
Sure,
So,
yeah. And I hope
yeah.
this was fun, and I hope whoever watches this, you feel seen, heard,
Yes.
something, and you laughed. Right? Like,
Yeah.
that's it. Because you know what? We all need to laugh.
I love to laugh, and
Yeah, it's
I'm,
important.
one final thing is, growing up, like even like my parents and just people around me, they always, because I'm one of those people where if there's a really hard thing happening, I will crack it. Not that I do it inappropriately, but I will like try and find the silver lining or the humor in the situation. And a lot of people are like, Munsa, that's weird. Why would you? And I'm like, that's how I process this, because
Yeah.
I don't like to wallow. But I know a lot of people then, it's just always been fascinating to me that, for me, it's like, I know it's serious, but we don't have to take it as seriously, you know?
Well, you know what? It's so funny that you say that. And I just have a quick little story recently. I had to bury my cousin last summer who battled breast cancer for about 12 years. And she was only in her 50s, right?
Yeah.
And this is my first cousin I grew up with, like, known me my whole life, would take us to the park in New York City. And her brother had like a heart, said loving sister, a heart flowers made of roses, right? And it was in,
Yeah.
and he wanted it to go into the coffin, and then with her on her journey. And so talk about craziness. The funeral director said, "Oh no, you can't include that in there because there's chances of mold." And we were like, "Say what?" We're like, "Wait, she's gonna get a mold allergy? She's dead." Like, right? So So we
Yeah.
were just laughing because what else do you do, right? And he's like, wait, I want, like, what? Who's digging her up to see if mold came, right? Like, what is this, right? Do you see what I'm saying? And it's not,
Yeah.
and it's a relief, right? And then, but what
Yes.
we did when they put her in the plot, we just threw the rose petals on top of the coffin, right? And then my cousin Jackie, her brother, like, who loves her, we just joked around. I said, "Don't fall in that hole. What are you doing?" Right? Because he was being like a goofball. But that's how we did. We just threw the rose petals in, because, but wild. Isn't that wild? It's going to be
It
mold.
is.
What? Sorry?
Right?
That's so weird. But yeah, you have to laugh.
You have to laugh. You have to laugh. And I love that. That's a good story to to end it on, I think.
I know, right?
Yeah. That's no, that's a lovely story. But
Wild.
you know what? Yeah, but you know what, Florence, again, I really do appreciate you taking the time and just being on the podcast and being so open and being so vulnerable, expressing everything you've expressed today. I've really appreciated learning from you as well, because again, grief, we'll have it. And I do hope that a lot of people learn from the words that you've given. And again, I just really want to appreciate you being able to speak on these things and speak on your life. Because again, this stuff is not easy, but people's journeys and experiences are valuable in every single way. So
Well,
thank you
thank
again.
you. And thanks for, I feel that. Thank you. That's important to me, that, and thank you for giving me this space to do it. Yeah, I'm grateful to you as well. I learned things from you too. So yes, it has been a pleasure. It's been fun.
Yeah.
Right? Even on grief. Now, who knew, everybody in the audience, who knew that you would actually laugh about, right? There you
Exactly.
go.
Exactly. Well, with that, I want to say thank you again to people who've been listening. Do comment in the chat, like when you watch this episode, and like, how you've viewed things, like, subscribe, all those wonderful things. We're going to have more coming. So yeah, again, thank you, Florence, and thank you everybody for watching, and we will catch you on the next episode. So
Thank
goodbye.
you. Bye.